Hey everyone, Cal here. So, the new Vengeance campaign just dropped on the PC servers in the Elder Scrolls Online a couple days ago, and to my surprise, the feedback I've been seeing online has been pretty positive so far. If you are totally out of the loop, this new Cyrodiil campaign is just a performance test that is currently only available on the PC servers. But for the next few days, open world PvP in ESO is going to feel quite a bit different than it normally does, with templatized characters and simplified class skills alone. Now, we've seen other tests over the years trying to boost PvP performance in Cyrodiil, but this one feels quite a bit more significant to me. There's been a lot of talk about what it means for the future of ESO's PvP, but I think the main takeaway here is that they're really trying to find the other end of the spectrum. Just how far can they push the performance, just how many players can they support at a single keep siege in Cyrodiil. Now, usually in Cyrodiil, we have pretty much every gear set in the game available, and we can mix and match to our heart's content, along with all of the skills from all of the different skill lines. And while I like that, and I think a lot of people out there like that, it has led to some performance issues. And the player caps on each campaign are lower today than they used to be, and probably lower than what most people want to see for keep battles. But the Vengeance campaign is allowing for way bigger battles in Cyrodiil, and honestly, I haven't really missed out on most of the usual skills and gear sets that I would use. Going into the test, I didn't really consider this, but this test has also meant that a lot of the more annoying PvP builds simply aren't possible. There's no bombers or ball groups, cross-healing doesn't really seem to be an issue, and I haven't run into any of those sort of unkillable players that you might find wrecking entire groups of players out in Cyrodiil. Even as a Rush of Agony enjoyer, I think we can all appreciate not getting whiplash from everybody using that set as well. So a lot of the complaints about Cyrodiil PvP beyond performance are also being addressed by this test, even if not totally intentionally. Of course, we have no way of knowing what's next for Cyrodiil, but from what I've seen in the first couple of days of the test, this feels full of potential. They've essentially removed every barrier to open world PvP in ESO. It's more accessible than ever for new players. If you're level 10 or above, you can jump straight in and you'll basically have the same opportunity as anyone else to be successful. There's no need to grind any additional skills or gear sets or level those skills up. Of course, you still have to have some concept of how combat works in ESO and how Cyrodiil works in particular, but it's much easier to jump in and try it out. Now, even though I am having a good time, I do think that the class skills alone are not enough, and I was really missing the weapon skills and the stamina morphs in particular. If we do see some version of the Vengeance campaign in the future, I would love to see stuff like the assault and defense skill lines and maybe even some of the guild skills make a return. If this becomes a future component of ESO's open world PvP, even if it's just a weekend event or secondary campaign, I do think that balancing is really going to be key. Of course, there's been a lot of talk about what happens next, and it's more tests probably. But I don't think that this is just some throwaway test. It's clear that a lot of effort has been put into this, so it could definitely lead to bigger changes based on player feedback. I can't imagine that as it exists today, the Vengeance campaign would become a permanent fixture replacing old Cyrodiil or anything like that. But assuming the player feedback continues to be positive, I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up somewhere between this super simplified version and the total build diversity that we've had in Cyrodiil up until now. Notably, there were actually 2 questions from the Guild Summit that actually sort of touched on the Cyrodiil Champions test and the Vengeance campaign in particular, and I thought Rich's responses were worth sharing here. So one of the questions that came up from the guild leaders was about capturing and claiming resources in Cyrodiil. Right now, it doesn't really do much for the guilds who bother to claim those keeps. And the response from Rich was that the focus is obviously on performance today and not necessarily the role that guilds play in PvP. Of course, they want to fix Cyrodiil's performance first, but they also hinted that if this campaign is successful, meets their performance goals, and there's positive feedback from the player base, then that focus is going to expand to include other parts of the Cyrodiil experience. But clearly, they've already got some other stuff in mind, and it does sound like this is just the first step to sort of retooling things in Cyrodiil. I think it also sort of suggests that this isn't just a performance test, but is also serving as a temp check to see how the player base reacts to simplified builds and less build diversity in Cyrodiil. Another question that came up at the summit was about the future of ESO. Specifically, if there was anything that Rich or the other devs on the call could say to reassure guild leaders that ESO would be around in another 5 to 10 years. And the answer was basically just to look at this Vengeance test. They pointed out that it was a massive investment of time and energy to simplify all these skills and build the campaign, and none of that would make sense to bother with if ESO was going away anytime soon. They've put a ton of time and energy into this, which wouldn't make any sense if the plan was basically to sunset the game. So while I think that's a decent answer to the question, I think it also says something about their goals for the future of ESO PvP. In much the same way that they wouldn't invest all this time in a test for an end-of-life product, I don't think they would invest all this time into the Cyrodiil Champions test if a performant and accessible Cyrodiil wasn't important to their vision for ESO in the future. So for anyone out there who cares about open world PvP in ESO, I would strongly recommend you go check out the Cyrodiil Champions test that's live right now on the PC servers. Even if you don't think you're going to like it, or you're upset about losing build diversity for this test, I think you should try it and make sure that you give them some feedback. Let them know what you like and you don't like, because the future of Cyrodiil campaigns may very well depend on the feedback from the player base. In general, I think trying to find a campaign type that has the broadest appeal that also has really good performance is a positive for the game. I don't really have any strong feelings about this because I've always enjoyed Cyrodiil as it exists today, but Vengeance does feel more epic. And it only took me about an hour to finish the Golden Pursuit that's live right now, which means that I was finding action faster, I was finding other players to fight and kill faster, we were taking keeps faster, there was just a lot more activity and a lot more engagement throughout the entire zone. Like I mentioned earlier, I did really miss my weapon skills, and some of these simplified class skills do need tweaks. But I also love not having to worry about bombers or unkillable players or ball groups camping keeps. If you had asked me prior to this test what my #1 issue was with Cyrodiil, I probably would have identified something like the lack of appealing rewards, or that it was too much effort to find the fun. I've always enjoyed Cyrodiil, but sometimes you show up and there's a lot of stuff getting in the way of having fun. You either have to run around too long to find a good fight, you get ganked on your way to the fight, or there's a ball group that's ruining everyone's day. And that ignores all the time that goes into prepping for traditional Cyrodiil. If you want to have a chance at being successful and having good fights, you're probably going to be spending a few hours researching a build, collecting the gear, upgrading the skills. There is a pretty high bar to get a character to the point where Cyrodiil can actually even be enjoyable, and it's only worth that time and investment if there's something you really want out of it. Most recently, I was willing to work on a new build for Cyrodiil and put in the time to get these new tattoos and the Aldmeri Dominion war marks, but I'm generally not willing to do it just to grind AP. Remove a couple of those barriers though, and all of a sudden, it's a different equation. So that's all for today's video. I just wanted to record some quick thoughts on the Vengeance campaign and the Cyrodiil Champions test before the test wraps up this weekend. I do hope anyone out there who cares about the future of Cyrodiil does hop on and gives the Vengeance campaign a go this week. As always, if you're new around here, don't forget to like and subscribe for more ESO videos. I'd also like to thank my patrons for supporting the channel. If you'd like to join them and get early ad-free access to some of my videos in the future, be sure to check out the Patreon linked on screen now. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back again real soon. Bye for now, everybody.